Due to the graphic nature of its content, listener discretion is advised.
From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, we fight our country's battles in the air, on land and sea. First to fight.
On this episode of Cigars and Sea Stories, the entire Cigars and Sea Stories team, shocking as it may be, sits down with Mr. John Mahshie, the founder and executive director of Veterans Healing Farm. And Mr. John Mahshie here joined the United States Air Force fresh out of high school. A series of experience, I'm sure, twists of fate wound up putting you down this path. And we are, we're just honored to have you with us, man. You've been adding in Cigars and Sea Stories terms, you've been adding a shit ton of value to the world. And it's really cool to finally be able to sit down and talk to you about all this stuff. So welcome.
Hey, man. Thank you so very much for having me.
Absolutely. So I actually didn't know that you were in the Air Force. What'd you do in the Air Force, JMI?
Well, I was a ground equipment mechanic, but honestly, I spent as much time getting out of that job as possible. So a bulk majority, as much as I could, I did the honor guard. But when I wasn't doing that, it was basically a glorified pizza delivery man service. I'd drop off aged pieces at different planes and fix them. Really didn't know what I was doing. So I would hit them with a screwdriver, and if it didn't fix, then I had to go back to the shop.
Nice.
For the service,
It's
for
a
the
solid
service, the
litmus test.
highest per capita budget. That comment probably wouldn't engender a lot of confidence in the tax public. I'm just throwing that out there.
Fortunately, there were a lot better mechanics than me. That was just never my cup of tea.
That's awesome.
All right, so tell me, what is the Air Force's version of hoorah?
Hoorah is hoorah.
Hoorah?
Yeah.
All right, so almost close enough.
It's pretty close.
So we got oorah, we got hooyah, and we got hoorah, and we got hua for all the services, I guess.
Probably all came from the same place, just saying.
No, I think the Marine Corps obviously came from someplace completely different because that's how we roll.
We were the originators.
Well, we're the ones that turned into the colloquial in order to just respond to anything.
We all sound like we're constipated.
Anyways, back to John Mahshie here.
Yeah, sorry. We get off on tangents, John. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, so what spurred you towards starting Veterans Healing Farm?
Man, that's a good question. It definitely was something that has kind of been in my mind for quite a while. When I had my first date with my wife, just to put in perspective, probably 2007, our first date, I told her about the idea of this vision of a healing farm. And at the time, I didn't even know how to grow a tomato. So obviously, there was a lot of work that needed to be done before it was possible. But I think a lot of it was just part of my story. When I joined at 18, back in 2000, and then obviously 2001 happened shortly after that, and had just gotten to my first duty assignment in California and been there for a month. And, obviously as a young kid going to war, not sure what was happening right after September 11th. And then September 30th of the same month, my father died in a motorcycle accident.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
It was a challenging experience. I mean, obviously you could probably imagine. I was 3,000 miles from any friends or family. Didn't really have a support community down there, and just kind of went into a depression for a while. And about 6 months after that, I had a chance to go down to Mexico and serve in a missions trip, and it was just really powerful. And so in probably 2.5 year time period, I went down there about 7 times. About 2 weeks each trip. Wow. And just serving is really important component to kind of healing. And then in terms of kind of the idea of the farm, obviously we're growing a lot of fruits and vegetables and doing a lot of farm activities, but the the bulk majority of it is really community focused. And so I'm just a firm believer that, in interpersonal relationships and in a community context is essential. It's not an option. It's absolutely necessary to be a healthy person, and especially for individuals that are struggling through particular issues.
Sure.
Yeah.
Fellowship.
I love your motto there: cultivating life through community.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. So how did you?
Some twist.
How did you really get going? I see that you, you and I have talked extensively about stuff, but what didn't you go to like a program at a college or something to kind of get this whole thing kickstarted?
Yeah, well, honestly, I think it was really birthed out of just a desire to create something that at the time when I first came up with it, I really had no idea what it looked like, but I knew that it was kind of had vegetables attached to it. So I needed to learn how to do that. But, just to kind of quick kind of background summary. So when I first got out, I got out in 2004 and came back and actually went to school for art. And so I got a fine arts degree and attempted to pursue that as a career. And even really before that, the first thing I did after I got out was I started a business called Media Business Card. And I won't take too long going too far into it, but it's important because, there was just one series of kind of entrepreneurial pursuit after the other. And there was a time in my life where I looked at them and I kind of thought I was like spinning my wheels or wasting all this time. But at this point, I look back on all of them and it's kind of the Mr. Miyagi, wax on, wax off, how they all just kind of rolled into each other. But that first business, it didn't last very long. I made a lot of mistakes that I've learned from, but that kind of transitioned into another project in which I created this kind of musical genre and passed out a bunch of CDs and learned a lot of lessons for that. And then that went into my art career where I studied with a world-renowned ceramics artist and pursued, launching an art business right as the economy tanked in 2008. Obviously not a good time to do it. And all the while, I had this vision of this healing farm for a long time. And in terms of kind of my participation in those activities, like right when I first got out, maybe 2005, I had a guy move in with me that was an alcoholic, a young kid, just got out of a substance abuse clinic. And he lived with me for about 8 months. And it was my first time kind of that one-on-one, kind of experience per se, and that just kind of led itself. It seemed like every year I would have a new guy come live with me, and went through about 4 or 5 of them. Everything from like one guy that was going to kill himself to another guy that was bipolar to another guy that had a traumatic brain injury. And so I had a lot of this kind of hands-on experience, and so that was where the vision really kind of came from. And then, in terms of getting trained for it, right around 2000 I think it was 2011, maybe 2010 is when I went to school for horticulture. And I just literally took 2 semesters, crash course, studied a bunch of books in the library. And then after 2 semesters of horticulture, I decided to plant this gigantic garden and launch a produce stand. And so the first time I had ever really planted a garden, I also started a business on the side of the road, trying to sell produce.
Nothing like diving right in, right?
Let's just say it was a disaster. And then from there, one business kind of came, transitioned into the next. And I think I did probably 7 businesses in about a 5-year period of time. Everything from launching a pesto company with 1,620 basil plants to a hummus company to a concession stand selling boiled peanuts and shaved ice and popcorn, candy corn or whatever. So there was a lot of kind of steps in the process, but for whatever reason, I never thought I could actually do it full time. I always thought it was going to have to be like a glorified hobby. And it wasn't until I went to the EBV that I realized that, you know what, this is my passion and this is the thing that I actually should be pursuing in terms of spending a bulk majority of my energy and effort towards.
So that you just said a whole bunch of stuff there that I'd like to expand on later in the conversation. But one of them, you talk about some of these guys that were coming in and out of your life as you're kind of going along in your journey that needed different kinds of help, were having different struggles. I'm gonna kind of lead you down a path here, but would you say that a lot of those relationships were sort of mentoring in nature?
Yeah, I mean, for me, for whatever reason, I guess I get a little insecure when it comes down to like, obviously I don't have credentials. I don't have, I came from an environment in which it was more of a religious context and just a lot of emphasis on being a leader in the church and all this kind of stuff. And so for whatever reason, I've always struggled with certain terminology. Like I've never really considered myself like a very, what's the term I'm looking for? I just don't really have like that desire to be like, I'm a mentor, I'm a leader. But, without question, it's, that idea of just really kind of walking alongside of people and kind of getting into the trenches and wrestling through the muck and the mire and just really being compassionate and empathetic and helpful. It's just been something that I've always kind of been drawn towards and have just felt that it's really, I know this is kind of weird to say, but it's really kind of comes from my own personal kind of healing. It's almost as if like the more I engage in that regard, and I think to some degree I'm kind of better at it than maybe some people who are more qualified than me, because it's not coming from like, oh, I learned this in a textbook. It's coming from like I've been there. And it's more of like an organic, just a natural kind of overflow of my story, basically.
Yeah. So you've got a lived experience that you're able to share with these guys, and whether you want to call yourself that or not, you actually have been a mentor for some time. And full disclosure to our audience, most of the Cigars and Sea Stories, well, half the Cigars and Sea Stories team anyway, knows you pretty well and has talked to you over a period of the last year or two, pretty extensively, and gotten to know you real well, and
broken some bread together.
Yeah, I've crashed on your couch, and your wife has fed me in your home, and for that I'm very grateful. But boy, I'll tell you, I just want to kind of complete the circle of my thought process here from when you initially told your story. So there's the mentorship piece. But then one of the other things you talked about was you had like all these different business ventures and all these little entrepreneurial things going on, and like a whole bunch of them failed. But now you've got a measure of success in doing some things, and actually some great success with Veterans Healing Farm. We could talk about that a little more here in a minute. But when you combine that with the mentorship aspect of what you do and building a community on the farm, you kind of, in my mind, embody what a social entrepreneur is all about. And that's one of the reasons I've kind of, I really, you're one of those guys that I look up to, and, you and I have talked about a lot of things in the past about, doing different types of things and trying to help people in different ways. And, your failures or setbacks or whatever that you've had along the way really have set you up for success now. What do you think, if you were to pick a couple of experiences maybe that maybe didn't seem like successes at the time, but really they're things that you kind of lean on now for experience, what would they be?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think it's important to mention that I I absolutely agree with like fail often, fail fast. But I think that it's important to always use a lowercase f. Who was it? It was Edison that said like, I didn't fail at making the light bulb 1,000 or however many times it was. He said, I figured 1,000 ways not to do it. And as long as you approach it from that perspective of like, yeah, I failed, but really, I just learned not to do it that way. And it's more of a transitioning from one to the other. And occasionally there's a little bit of a break. But, it's so strange to think that for whatever reason, it's like, you grow up in life in all throughout. I mean, I have two little girls, and as they're learning to walk, when their first attempt at walking and they fall down, I don't think to myself, wow, they failed at walking, right? Or the first time they ever get on a bike and they try to ride a bike and they fall down. It's not like, oh, they failed at riding a bike. It's like they gave it a shot and they didn't get it the first time, no surprise. And so let's give it a second and a third. And eventually they ride their bike. And for whatever reason, when it comes down to entrepreneurship or business, it's like we live in a culture to where there's very little patience. It's almost as if, an individual who's persistent and continues forward in the midst of difficulties, they're badgered and they're spoken down to, which is absurd because it's like, who in their right mind thinks that the first time anybody does anything, they're gonna, occasionally that happens, and from my perspective, if it does happen, it's probably a disservice. I think that you're a little bit of a disadvantaged if you achieve success in your very first go at it, because you may get the impression that that's normal, and it's not normal.
Yeah, you're right. It is absolutely not normal. So another thing that the audience might not realize, so Michael, myself, and Bennett, we all met at Entrepreneurship Boot Camp for Veterans with Disabilities at Syracuse University in 2014. And John, you had mentioned that you attended EBV. Where did you attend that and when? It was not our class; it was a different class.
No, it was 2013, so it was a year before you guys, and it was down in Florida State University. And to be honest, that was a game changer for me. I think as military guys, like, it's something that's bred in us. Like, on the one hand, I genuinely believe, like, at my core, I almost look at it as a curse. At my core, like, I have to pursue creativity, innovation, like, entrepreneurship, whatever you want to call it. This need to, like, my brain's just wired this way, and I honestly not often, but there have been many occasions in which I've thought to myself, like, shit, I wish I could just wake up in the morning and eat the same damn bowl of oatmeal. Like, why do I have this idea that I can't stop thinking about? Like, I wish this shit would just go away, but it doesn't, and we all have to be authentic to who we are, and so I did that, and yet, until I found myself in a position, and thank the Lord for the EBV. I couldn't imagine where I would be without it. But it was almost like that small glass of water. It's like what I got from the EBV, honestly, wasn't a ton. I mean, I had read a lot of books, and I had been through entrepreneurial programs, and I had studied a lot. So a lot of kind of the crash course material. I mean, it was rich. Don't get me wrong, and there were some incredible speakers. But in terms of the thing that I got the most from it, that sense of, like, there's a community, a support community behind me, and they have resources, and they believe in me, and they provided me this opportunity to get, like, that last little bit, because it makes no difference how much you have. You have 90% of it. You run 26 miles, you still have that 0.2. That 10% is still lacking. You can't finish the race if you don't have that last little bit. And up until that point, I didn't have that. I didn't have people out there that believed in me, that said, John, you can do this. Not only you can do this, but they actually invested something into me, and they said to me, report back and prove yourself almost. And so that was the last little bit that I had missed. And after that experience, it just was a game changer. It really changed everything, to be honest.
And that's another thing that you bring up too. actually, her wife is also a graduate of EBVF at Syracuse, and she graduated the same year that we did, 2014, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So.
And that was good for her. Just real quick with that, because my wife, she's actually often says this. She really doesn't consider herself a entrepreneur, although she obviously attends these different things and is really in a lot of ways just as much a part of the Veterans Healing Farm as anyone. I mean, she was fundamental in it being created. But for people that aren't, for veterans that are considering it, if they don't consider themselves entrepreneurs, it's so valuable. I mean, regardless, I feel like there's just so much that you can get from it. And if people do think that they may, and they go through it and they decide at the end of it that it's not for them, it's actually so much better than for them to spend year after year after you pursuing something and then come to the conclusion afterwards, after investing all these resources and energy. And in our situation with my wife, although she, like I said, doesn't see herself as a strong entrepreneurial spirit, she's married to me, and she's an incredible partner in terms of the value that she got from that. I mean, again, it's just been, it's weird when you're married to your business partner, or right. It's a very interesting dynamic. But in terms of her going through these programs, she actually just last weekend got back from VWise, which is another kind of branch of the EBV, or it's under the same program. And so, she's definitely plugged into the system, and we've been extremely blessed by her being allowed to be a part of it.
Yeah, definitely. So what else do you have going on, John Mahshie, besides Veterans Healing Farm?
Oh, gracious. Well, having two girls, that's something. Keeps me a little bit busy. And
I know all about that.
Yeah, it seems, I mean, honestly, at this point, I've had to really kind of shift gears in kind of start to really kind of prioritize and focus, kind of cut certain things out of my life. And for probably the last, well, let's see. So this 2015 was when I went full-time with Veterans Healing Farm. And prior to that, I was doing professional web development. And that was actually the business that I launched out of the EBV. So I went through the EBV. I started my web design business, and up until then, all the different businesses I had done, I really made no money from them. I mean, a little bit, but not even enough to say they were profitable. However, with web development, I did quite well, and I guess in the first quarter of 2015, I made $25,000. I netted $25,000. So I made enough money in that quarter to put me in a position for second, third, and fourth quarter to essentially, go full time at the farm. And then in 2015, I started salary at the farm, and made a salary of $18,000, which obviously I wasn't getting rich, but it was enough to keep the mortgage paid.
Hell yeah. Making more we are, bro.
We all feel your pain, brother.
I'm just saying, like, there was days where I'm like, shit, I made $25,000 in the first quarter. Like, what am I thinking? Like, when things got tight. But that's the thing about wealth. I mean, it's not just possessions. It's also purpose and fulfillment. And for me, this is what I desire to do. So the sacrifice was well worth it. But as things progressed, I mean, I'll be completely honest, like, this has kicked my ass. Like, the amount of work that this has required is insane. Farming in general is a very difficult occupation. And in terms of launching a nonprofit, and really because of the nature of it, it's not just the struggles that nonprofits have, but it's also the fact that it's very kind of innovative, and there's really no blueprint I can draw from. It's not like I can copy somebody's business model or look at what other people have done. I'm trying to kind of cut a path into a forest that's, there's a lot of landmines. There's a lot of tricky things going on in this particular field. I mean, at the end of the day, the kinds of things I'm trying to address are very serious. When people say, oh, well, 22 people a day kill themselves. Well, these are real people that have real problems, and to try to impact that community is not an easy task, and it's very complicated. And in terms of what works and what doesn't, coming up with a hypothesis and then testing that hypothesis, it's just a shit ton of work. I mean, it's well worth it, but there's no way anyone could naively go into this kind of disillusioned and walk out of it without just being completely overwhelmed. And fortunately for me, I think I knew what I was getting into, but it's still one of those situations to where it's been pretty much everything I have to give it in order to get to the point to where I'm at.
It really makes you wonder how these guys did it back in the day with like no machinery and just their hands and their own horsepower, literally, with the farming, with no tillers or anything like that. It's just crazy.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about the farm itself. Where are you? Tell us, describe what is going on at the farm.
Yeah, because you also do a raised bed, do you not?
Yeah, it's one of the techniques. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to just inject myself like that. It's just...
Oh, it's cool.
It's just... please, tell us about the farm, the raised bed. It snapped straight into my mind because that was one of the biggest things for anybody who's wheeling around and stuff, the accessibility and being able to get your hands dirty.
Yep. All right, well, I'll kind of try to do it a little bit systematic. I know I can be long-winded, so I'll try to keep it short. We have 5 kind of distinct services that we're currently providing, and then one more that we're looking forward to launching. In terms of kind of just the base of the organization, the primary service, it's this kind of unique concept that we've created. There's a term called Community Supported Agriculture, CSA, and the idea is that you basically pay a farmer at the beginning of the season, and then throughout the season you pick up a box of vegetables. And typically it's like $500 in this area. The cost depends on where you live, and that's for like a summer share, and then there's additional fee for a fall share. But although the name is Community Supported Agriculture, there is really not a lot of community into it. Essentially, the only time you meet anyone is when you see them for 5 minutes as you pass by and grab your box. And then, there's other concepts like community gardens, but most of those kind of similar thing. You get a little garden space. There's a guy that's good at tomatoes. He's just there to get his tomatoes. Like, he doesn't want to be bothered. And in terms of just like having a place to go to really build a relationship that centers around that particular, agenda, it's difficult. I mean, in each and every day that goes by with social media, which is really kind of antisocial, people are just becoming more and more reclusive. In terms of military folk, I think that's probably one of the most difficult challenges to deal with when you get out, is that the military community is so inclusive. Every time you PCS or TDY or go to a new base, everybody on that base has gone through that experience. And so you almost go from 0 to best friends in about 3 minutes. Whereas in the civilian world, it's just not the same. I mean, you have to like kind of break through, and there's so much kind of cliquish little like, people have been friends for whatever, and it's just a hard process. So that was the basis for this concept that we originally created, which was this micro community. The idea behind it is that when you have an organization that gets too large, it becomes something where you're basically trying to feed the machine. Whereas for us, we really wanted to be about the people. And so we put a cap on it for 30 families, which 30 families is about 100 people. Most families have kids. So it's still a decent amount of folk. But the idea is that, when you have it around that range, folks aren't just falling through the cracks, or if somebody says, how are you doing, they actually give a damn, or if you stop showing up, they actually notice. And so that's what we wanted. And the way we went about creating that is essentially by using the garden. And really, honestly, more than anything else, as Ben said, there's this idea of breaking bread. It really revolves around the meal. When people get together and eat a dinner with each other, have a potluck, it's so conducive to that kind of camaraderie or just exchanging life with each other. Up until then, it's so easy to just be distracted by these things that matter a lot, but in our culture we put way too much emphasis on personal religion or political beliefs or all these different things. Like, they're important, but in terms of, like, at the end of the day, we're humans and we're going to need to live with each other and we need to get along with each other. And why can't we really enjoy each other? Like, we have a lot more in common than we don't. And being in a meal or sharing a meal with each other, I think provides a perfect context for that. And so the way the organization works, that particular service, we call it our perma tribe. And for anyone that's familiar with, like, different innovative ways to farm or create energy or grow produce or animals or all these different things, there's a term called permaculture, which is like permanent agriculture or permanent culture. It's a combination of the two words. And it encompasses all of those kind of innovative techniques. And so we create a concept called perma tribe, which is like permanent tribe being community, and then the perma is kind of play on the permaculture. And so that perma tribe is a model in which we purposefully designed to be sustainable, truly sustainable, because in this field you often hear sustainability and they typically refer to environmental sustainability. Now, economic and social sustainability, those are kind of on the side, but from my perspective, they're just as important, if not more important, because you can't replicate it if it's not economically sustainable. And if it's not also socially sustainable, it needs to work in not just your particular cultural context, but if it's going to impact a large group of people, it needs to kind of go beyond one little particular little niche market. And so we created kind of general principles in things that are really innovative. Very, very fortunate to live in a very unique space. 10 minutes down the road from our farm is where the Mother Earth News, it's basically the number one kind of magazine in the country for these sort of topics. It's where it was founded, and 3 of the founding members of Mother Earth News magazine are directly involved with our organization, along with probably one of the best botanists in the world from my perspective, and some very, very, very gifted individuals. And so that's the help we have. And just to kind of run down on how it works, I essentially, and hopefully here in the near future, am going to hand off that baton to a garden manager. But up until now, I am responsible for all the planning, prepping, and everything that's necessary to get the garden going. And I grow enough food that 30 families are able to harvest essentially unlimited fruits and vegetables from May until November. So they can take as much as their family could possibly use. And if you're a veteran family, it costs $100 to get unlimited produce from May until November, all organically grown. If you're a civilian family, it's $200. And we purposefully have a mix. There's a term in farming called monoculture. It's the idea that there's farmers out there with 1,000 acres of corn. Well, if you only have 1,000 acres of corn, you're going to have diseases and pests that you're going to have to use really toxic stuff to deal with because there's no diversity. I think the same is true in terms of mental illness and just individuals that are struggling with particular things. If you only surround yourself by similar people that have those similar issues, which is most comfortable, you're going to be less likely to really progress. It's not good, it's easier to do that, but it's not as good. And so we create an environment which is a little bit of a balance between the two, and yet in terms of the focal point is towards veterans. And mind you, we do have multiple issues, multiple services, but in terms of this particular service, it is designed so that these families pay a fee. And they show up whenever they want. They have access to the farm 24/7. They can get the kids out of the house, go play in the creek, fly a kite. Families will plan picnics with each other and show up at particular times, and they harvest their own food. And so on your way to go back to your house from work, every evening you can stop by and get the freshest salad you've ever had. And they don't have to do any maintenance. The maintenance, in terms of being weed free, comes from a particular method that we utilize. We use raised beds and we use wood chips. And the wood chips aren't incorporated into the soil. That would deprive the soil of nitrogen. They're layered as a mulch, and we have absolutely no weeding. We have a very, very healthy garden with a lot of diversity, a lot of flowers, which not only make it aesthetically pleasing, but also bring in a lot of beneficial insects that eat the pest. And so we have very few pest problems, very few disease problems, very healthy crops. And throughout the summer, we have all sorts of activities, potluck dinners and movie nights and camping retreats, and just tons of different, opportunities and ways for people to come out and to engage in really, I like to say, to be known and to know, to be loved and to love, to serve and to be served.
Cigars and Sea Stories is proud to support and sling Counter-Strike coffee. Counter-Strike coffee, I want you to know, is meant to be drink black. Now, I myself love coffee. I'm a big coffee drinker. I went away from black coffee for a little while. Needed the cream and sugar when I was rocking it with the generic blend. Counter-Strike coffee brought me back into the fold in a huge, huge way. They do a great dark roast. I'm a big fan of napalm. That's my fave. Smooth operator is good, though. It can go with cakes and pies, and I got a bit of a sweet tooth. I know a couple of us do, And then also Firewatch. Firewatch, that's going to be the kick in the ass that you need in order to get your day going the right way. You know what I'm saying? If you haven't already done so, check out counterstrikecoffee.com. Use promo code Cigars and Sea. You will get 10% off. Again, that's counterstrikecoffee.com. Use promo code Cigars and Sea to get yourself 10% off.
That's awesome. Yeah. Hey, I just want to break in and just help describe, because I've been there before. I've seen your place, and it's absolutely beautiful. If you're a guy that's just looking to kind of reacquaint yourself with the land, and kind of get back to nature a little bit. Even if you don't know how to grow anything, just walking around the property at Veterans Healing Farm can be, a pretty cool experience. How many acres do you got where you're actually growing stuff right now?
So the farm itself, so it's a family farm. It's my mother's property. I'm John Mahshie. It's Mahshie Lane. And it's 9 acres that she owns, and there's another parcel that's a 1.1 acre plot. Our members garden, believe it or not, the members garden that we grow enough food for 30 families is only 1/4 of an acre. And the idea is that we've created a model that anyone in the country that can acquire 1/4 of an acre and come up with $1,200 has the capacity to replicate. So it's very important for us to create a system that is not going to require a tremendous amount of land or a tremendous amount of resources. Now, once that was created and we essentially, validated proof of concept, we were able to create something that actually worked, very intensive farming. From there, I purposefully went out of my way to lease a 1.1 acre parcel of land to put in a new garden, because the land was essentially destroyed. It had been conventionally farmed. It was rubbish soil. The soil that I was working with on my mom's land was beautiful, and the soil just right across the creek, a farmer had been using it for a series of years and had just absolutely ruined it. And I wanted to actually, I had a lot of knowledge and had studied and I knew how to restore the land, but I needed to actually have, personal experience with it, because I knew that there's going to be a lot of people out there that are going to want to do this, and they're not going to have, beautiful topsoil. They're going to need to, I'm going to need to be able to really, hands-on know exactly what I'm talking about when I instruct them on how to deal with it. And so we created a new garden on that new piece of property, the 1.1 acre parcel. And that garden, all the food we raised there went to a local food pantry. And so it was 3,700 pounds of food last year. Next year, it's going to be double that. And the goal is, this past year, we just took it to Interfaith Assistance Ministry. It was a local food pantry, but we're currently in the process of talking with the VA hospital in Asheville and the desire is to create a free farmers market in their parking lot and provide veterans access to, very rich, organically grown food free of charge. And in addition to that, we also have a series of hugelkultur beds, which are about 4.5 feet high. They have over 1,000 strawberry plants on it, and it makes it to where a guy in a wheelchair can roll up and pick strawberries. We grow over 60 hops plants. We have raspberries and blackberries and pawpaw and blueberries and service berries and peaches and apples and pretty much everything you could possibly imagine outside of citrus.
I'm getting hungry. So that 1.1 acre plot, is that the same one that the sheepdog chapter came out and cleared that one time?
Well, they actually helped clear the woodlands that were next to it, and that woodlands we're in the process of putting in. We actually inoculated about 20 mushroom logs, so we'll have mushroom, golden seal, and ginseng back there, and we're also looking at doing a facility for we'll probably talk about it in a minute, but we have a new program we're going to be running that is a bunkhouse for veterans to come out, and we want to create what's called a yurt. It's like a Mongolian tent. That will be in the woods to house females to kind of create a separate barracks for them.
Yeah, keep them away from the guys in the containers.
All I know is that I want to go to the permaculture boot camp. That's all I know.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, me too, man.
So I can share a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one of those things that fits into kind of this this crazy story. I just feel very blessed. Like, I had an idea a very long time ago, and by very long time ago, probably 4 years, I had thought about this idea of wanting to get a hold of some shipping containers and create a facility where veterans could come out. And when I first came up with it, I had no damn idea what I was talking about. Like, for one, I think, originally the notion was that it would be a residence facility. I quickly realized that the amount of help that individuals that are suffering from mental illness or substance abuse, what they actually need, if it was going to be replicatable, it just wasn't going to be possible. And there's a lot of organizations that do a great job at that, but the cost associated with full-time salaries for counselors and taking people to appointments and paying for clothing and food and transportation, all these different things, like, it's just going to be a huge undertaking. And so I quickly realized that wasn't going to work. And then the same thing with this shipping container notion is, like, when I actually started to factor in what it would cost to take, I could get a used shipping container, 40-foot unit or a 20-foot unit for maybe $2,500 or $3,000, but that's not the cost associated with it. The cost is the retrofitting, and it gets very expensive very quickly, especially depending on the quality in which you're trying to create. And so when I looked into it, I quickly began to be discouraged, because I just realized, unless I had, say, $60,000-$80,000, like, to create a decent facility, it just wasn't going to happen. And so I kind of began to just wonder if it was even possible, and started to kind of lose sight of it. But the whole idea, with the reason why I chose that particular kind of building material, was that I really felt like it was just an awesome analogy. It was just this, like, representation of veterans. Because if you think of a shipping container, it's this very strong steel vessel. It's got so much strength and so much potential. But countries like America, we import a lot. We don't export a lot. And so you get these huge pile-ups of them. Hundreds of thousands of them are stacked in these gigantic yards. And they're just discarded because their mission is over. They were built for a particular purpose, and it's no longer needed. And so they're just kind of scrapped. And if you think of a lot of veterans, they are trained, and they are strong, and they are capable. Veterans can get shit done. But when they get back, their mission is over, and they don't know what to do next. And they've never been encouraged to be self-aware. Never once, when I was in the service, maybe you guys are different. The Marines, maybe they encourage you to they ask you questions like, well, what are you passionate about, Tim? What do you like to do? Hell no. That's not that's not what's at. It's like, this is the mission. This is how to accomplish the mission. This is what you need to accomplish the mission. Now get to work. And yet when they get out, all of a sudden, after years and years and years of having that kind of interaction with life, now all of a sudden they're supposed to know what they want to do. And what, and oftentimes, it's kind of like just going off like a leaf blowing in the wind. Maybe I should start my own business. Maybe I should go to school. If so, what for? I don't know. And so what I chose to do in terms of these, or I guess the idea, back it up a little bit in terms of the shipping containers, was that, by retrofitting this unit, repurposing it, it's almost like putting it onto a new mission. And the same for the veteran is as they come out, we want to provide a place for them to really kind of discover what that looks like for them. And there's a lot of really incredible initiatives out there for veterans. The Farmer Veteran Coalition is helping veterans become farmers. There's a lot of other organizations out there that are out there trying to help veterans find careers. One thing that I, kind of thought or just was, again, this came out of just my personal experience, because I have spent so much time working with individuals that kind of mentally have struggled with things. And personally, I had that struggle myself. What I realized is if you have an individual who is kind of spiritually, psychologically, mentally, emotionally unhealthy, and you provide them financial health, that's the only thing you focus on, well, then oftentimes when they get the money, they use it kind of inappropriately. They self-medicate, or it can actually be more destructive than if they didn't have the money in the first place. Whereas if you can help them heal in those other areas, then they can get a job and keep a job and become a productive member of society. And both are needed. I don't want to give the impression that the organizations out there that are helping veterans get jobs aren't incredibly valuable. They absolutely are. But at the same time, for me, I really wanted to create an environment that could provide that opportunity for them to really kind of transition. Because unfortunately, the TAPS program is just not enough. I know they try, but
we bag on that all the time.
Well, I try. I don't want to build enemies, but I mean, any person, if you think about the amount of time that they put into basic training, into tech school, into all these programs to create soldiers. And then all of a sudden, they're supposed to get out in this real short and sweet program that's going to be enough. Well, it's just not for most people. Maybe for a couple it is, but for most folks, it's just not. And so for us,
I knew we weren't the only ones that got it, because I've been saying that ever since we started Cigars and Sea Stories. The military takes a young kid who's impressionable right out of high school, living under mom and dad's roof. Never really learned how to be an adult in civil society for the most part, probably 99%. And then you spend whatever amount of time in the service after being indoctrinated into a certain way of living as a serviceman. And then on the back end, you get 5 days of death by PowerPoint, to try to teach you how to be an adult civilian. And it doesn't work very well.
Well, especially for individuals that are dealing with traumatic issues. It's not only transitioning out of that environment, but it's also oftentimes, unfortunately these days, individuals that have been exposed to a lot of trauma, and they have to process it. And oftentimes to do that properly, it takes time. It's not something that there's just this magic pill that you can take and it's going to just fix everything. Usually the issues they're dealing with, the anxiety or the sleeplessness or the depression, those are symptoms. There's a root, and that root, requires a holistic approach. And so in terms of the shipping containers, this is where I was saying in terms of just like, it was just a blessing. It was like the Lord showed up, and my wife and I, we competed in the national conference at the EBV last year. And we were awarded their first place prize, and we were also awarded the best venture helping veterans. And they gave us $35,000. And I went home, and mind you, I had already basically given up on the notion of really being able to do the shipping container idea because of the cost, at least for the time being. However, when I got back, it was one of those things where I knew it wasn't going to work, but I figured, I might as well just try one more time. So I went on eBay and I searched, and it was like within a couple of days after getting home. And, lo and behold, there's this unit, and it's real arbitrary. It makes no sense. It's like poor quality pictures and really horrible description. And I call the guy up, and he sends me 60 images, and he blows my mind away. It's like I sat on Santa Claus's lap and told him like my wildest dreams. I had no idea what to even ask for because I'm not a fucking engineer. And as I told you guys, I'm not a mechanic either. I'm not any of this stuff. And yet this unit was built by incredibly gifted individuals to sell to FEMA as a prototype for their disaster relief. So it was actually designed to house 8 people at a time to go out in the middle of nowheres and be completely self-sufficient. So it has 8 bunk beds in it. It has an off-grid power system. It has a bathroom. It's top-notch. I mean, everything about it is built to federal standards.
Do you remember the day that you got those pictures and you called me at like 10 o'clock at night? And you're like, dude, I have to run this by you because I want to know if you think it's a scam or not. You remember that?
It was, yeah. I mean, honestly, I think I probably called not every, like all the, and there's only maybe a handful. So I don't want to make you feel like you're just chopped meat or something like that. But no, like I didn't know, it was just like, when you have those kind of experiences, you often hear in the world we live in all the time. If it's too good to be true, it's probably not true. And maybe that's the truth, but I think the attitude behind it is off. In the notion that, if you genuinely seek it, you will find it. Well, hey, guys, thank you so very much for having me on. I truly appreciate it.
Yeah, brother. It was great talking to you again, and great stuff you got going on. I'm looking forward to seeing you next weekend at the EBV National Convention in Charlotte.
Likewise.
Yeah, man, that's going to be cool. It's going to be a really good time.
All right. Well, best of luck to you guys. I think y'all have a really great thing going on here. And again, I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to be a part of it.
Yeah, man.
All right,
Well,
brother.
right on. Yes.
See you soon.
Please come on back anytime now that we've introduced you full on to the audience and we've shared some of what you're doing, a little bit just here and there in passing and stuff. So it's cool to have you on, introduce you to the audience, and then we can do some updates later on down the line as things are continuing to grow. I mean, Permatribe sounds like something really cool. So, all right, we'll talk more offline. Hey, folks, if you haven't already done so, click subscribe, rate, review the podcast. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, or Player FM. And yeah, we really appreciate your comments. They actually make the show. It allows us to tailor how we do things and a few of these different questions that we throw to our interviewees. It's real hardball over here. Let me tell you what. Real pointed questions. Solid. I'm so full of shit. It's unreal. Thank you to all of our sponsors out there. You can find our sponsors, by the way, under the resources link on cigarsandseastories.com/resources. So check that out. And yeah, you guys have a wonderful evening. Namaste.
Yeah, boys.
Or some shit like that.
Some kind of shit like that.
Whatever those folks
Did you
say.
just speak some Japanese or something?
I don't know. I'm going to go stretch. All right. Jocelyn, cue the music.